So my name is Sudha, for those of you that haven't come here before, and I've started this space, this center, Sunlit Path, just a little over 3 months ago. It's part of a trust that my mom and I started called Papa Mal Trust. So this is a unit of that. And we have events for music and dance and healing, art and healing, with the intention to connect to ourselves more deeply and to each other more deeply. So far, actually, this is the first event we're having of this nature. So far, we've had healing with medicinal herbs. We've had Drupad workshops and concerts, Bharatanatyam workshop concert. I've been doing a lot of mindfulness and meditation sessions for kids and adults. We have weekly movie nights. We've stopped for some time. They're back now, every Wednesday. And then a gathering for every full moon and new moon, sort of a meditative gathering outside to connect to the cosmos. So that's basically it. This is the emblem that sort of symbolizes the different offerings of the Sunlit Path. There's a skylark on the left, which is for the art. There's a story to it that you can read online on the website. On the right is the Caladrius, which is for healing. There's a story for that you can read. And on top is a raven for all the mystical practices like the full moon night that we offer. So that's it, I think. Yeah, so welcome if it's your first time here. And it is a trust. We have a lot of community gatherings like this. If you'd like to donate to the trust, it's most welcome. In the front on the left is a box as well as a scan code if you'd like to offer any amount from your heart. So Jayakumar has come here straight from Chennai just to offer his gift to us, and I'm very grateful to him. I'm seeing him after, I don't know, something like 12, 13, 14 years, something like that. 12, 13 years. We met in 2007, 7, when I was studying dance at Kalakshetra. He had finished his music program and he was working at Kalakshetra. And the following year I started working where he was, and he was doing the archiving and so many things.
Documentation and archive.
Yeah, many things at Kalakshetra. And I don't remember exactly what he did, but I remember that I really don't remember, but I remember he was extremely sincere and passionate and just from his being offering. And so when I reached out to him, it was like, offer anything, just come, because I know it will be of value and of depth. And so I'm very grateful that he's here. And another one big aspect is to bring in really the wealth of this land. And so he's chosen the topic of the mind and body, the Thirumanthiram. So obviously he'll speak about it. But the idea is that through music and the language, and we also do spiritual text. So it's a blend of these different spaces. So he's really bringing in a whole new aspect that really is crucial, I feel, considering where we are, and like the wealth is right here, and often it's not accessible for us. And he's one of the few that I know that are really in it. He's doing a lot of amazing work. In addition to music, he teaches Carnatic music. He also has a culture tourism company. He takes people to different places with a history and culture place, which he's been doing for about 5 years maybe. And in the last few years, with his passion to revive handloom textile, he has sari, it's called Tuhil. The tourism company is called Courtyard Travels. So he's doing that, and I think recently he's also the consultant for the movie Maniratnam film that's coming out called Punniyin Selvam. So yes, he's doing so many things all from his heart, and I'm really happy that he's here, and I shall let him take over from here. Thank you.
மறைநீரும் தொடரொணாதனி ஏனை நாடரும் தெரியுணாதனி என்னை ஆண்டு கொண்டவா ஏனை நாடரும் தெரியுணாதனி என்னை ஆண்டு கொண்டவா ஊனை நாடகம் ஆடுவீத்தம்மா பருக வைத்தம்மா ஊனை நாடகம் ஆடுவீத்தம்மா பருக வைத்தம்மா ஞான நாடகம் ஆடுவீத்தவா நைய வையக துடைய வீச்சையே ஞான நாடகம் ஆடுவீத்தவா நைய வையக துடைய வீச்சையே வானநாடகு அறியுணாதனி Namaskaram everyone. That was a verse from Manikavasagar, Thirumanthiram. Those who are familiar with Tamil would have been able to follow it. And in the last few years that I have been studying South Indian Shaivism, and in the past 1 year Kashmiri Shaivism, has really helped me to sort of ask some important questions rather than finding answers. I wouldn't say I have found answers, but it has enabled me to ask sensible questions on texts that we come across on a daily basis. My travel to various temples and observing them, and then you also constantly read the text and literature associated with such culture of temple building. I thought I will share some aspects, especially focusing on Thirumanthiram, an important text that is usually not sung. You have Devaram, Divya Prabandham, composed by the Shaivite saints, usually sung on a daily basis in temples and households. Thirumanthiram, it's in a very, very tricky place, that is theology as well as philosophy. There are 3046 verses, each verse about 4 lines, and very intriguing to know that this saint Thirumoolar, who came to South India and composed these verses, apparently he sat under a peepal tree in Thiruvavadurai, which is about 3.5-4 hours from here near Kumbakonam, under a peepal tree, and then composed one verse every year. He's supposed to have lived for 3000 plus years, and each year one verse came out of him. That is Thirumanthiram, a very, very interesting Shaivite text, and because it covers certain philosophical aspects of South Shaivism, and many theories around him that we will sort of speak about it. And since you are all living in this wonderful community and it gives you enormous opportunity to travel down if you have time, Chidambaram considered to be the center of Shaivism when it comes to South India, and the idea of Ananda Tandava, that some other time I would love to explore with you all. The idea of Ananda, the connection between the Kashmiri Shaivism and the Shaivism in South India is very strong. And we live in a very, very unique culture that constantly things were questioned by seekers. Constantly people were creating material things such as temples and houses. On the other hand, you also have people questioning the same, but it is not opposing, rather it is sort of contrast colors and pictures that were given to such movements. Before going into Thirumanthiram and Thirumoolar, I just give you a historical picture of Shaivism in South India, especially in Tamil Nadu. And the earliest known written material that are available to us in South Indian Shaivism or Tamil Shaivism is Sangam poetry. The name Shiva is not mentioned. So the Shiva is not mentioned, but his various forms are mentioned. The one who drank the poison, Srikanta, and then who sits under the banyan tree, Dakshinamurti. The name Dakshinamurti is not a Tamil word, so he's called as Alamar Chelvan, the one who sit under the Al tree. Alamaram being banyan tree. So the sitting under the banyan tree and the people tree is, I think it's a very, very common thing across the, divine beings, anywhere you choose. And Shiva is mentioned that. And then we come to a very crucial, phase. Yeah. Srikanta. Sri means poison. Sri means Lakshmi, as well as Sri means poison as well. So when the churning of the ocean happened, the poison comes. Nilakanta. Here we call it as Srikanta as well. So again, Sri means Lakshmi, Sri means poison as well. So he's known as Srikanta. Those episodes are mentioned. So it is, Shaivism slowly grew in South India, and with the Bhakti movement, so that is very crucial. The Bhakti movement in North India happens little later, around 10th and 11th century. In South, with Shaivism and Vaishnavism, to counter Buddhism and Jainism in historical context I'm not getting into the philosophical aspect of it. To counter that, this Bhakti movement is very fascinating period to all of us to understand what is all this about. And where you have people going from one shrine to another shrine, existing temples of Shiva and Vishnu, singing in praise of that presiding deity there, those temples became such a sacred place. Chidambaram is that of great center for Shaivism. Even today, people from North and Kashmir to Kanyakumari, everybody come to visit Chidambaram. Such rich culture, rich heritage, rich in literature, and the physicality of it is one angle. But to go and see the day-to-day aspect of the temple with rituals and traditions and the way the music is sung, the mantras are chanted, those are all the things usually not very well observed, people who sort of try to go and see places. This also part of it. And when it comes to Thirumoolar, like other saints, I sang a verse of Manikavasagar, who supposed to have lived in 9th century. But Thirumanthiram, our text today that we are going to see few verses, this Thirumoolar was known as Sundaranath, who came from Kashmir. Some scholars say he came from north, but there is no proven record that he came all the way from Kailash, but we all know for sure he comes to south all the way from there. With that, he must have brought some of the philosophical ideologies or ideas from Kashmiri Shaivism is one theory. And he comes all the way to south and he chooses a particular place near Tiruvavadurai, again another great temple of Lord Shiva, which is near Kumbakonam. Pondicherry, Kadalur, Chidambaram, Sirkali, from there it's Kumbakonam is about 2.5 hours. There, because this region is filled with temples and you come across such historicity, such rich cultural, such rich literature around it, is what is really fascinating. So the Sundaranath comes from all the way from the Himalayas and comes to this particular spot, and then he chooses to continue his penance, and he sees a dead person whose name was Moolan in Tamil. He was a cowherd. So Sundaranatha sees this ascetic who comes down, sees this dead body and the cows that he was hearing that the cows were crying, they missed their master and they were not able to move away from him. So he does Parakaya Pravesha, where Sundaranatha leaves his body and then he sends his life to that dead person, and then he gets up and then he goes with the cows to the house. And then when his wife tries to approach him and then he stays away, I am not your husband, I am someone else. That's the story. And then everybody in the village realize that this man the body is the same, but it's not the same person. I think that is the very, very intriguing point to focus when we say I, or you, or us. what do we exactly mean? Whether we mean the physicality of it or the life that resides in it. So these are the things that Thirumanthiram itself speaks about it. So this is the first person we come across whenever we speak about siddhas and yogis and saints who does this parakaya pravesham, leaving your life from your body, transferring it to another person's body. So this act comes as a compassionate act so that the cows don't miss their master. That was his first act. And then he settles down under the tree in Thiruvadurai temple, and then he goes into penance for 3000 years is the legend. So from there his name became Thirumulan. Mula is origin. Moolam is origin point, originating point. With respect, the Thiru, usually Sri is what is given. Thiru is the Tamil word equivalent to Sri. He becomes Thirumular or Thirumulan. With that, he covers extraordinary amount of theological ideas of Shaivism and Lord Shiva. He speaks about Ashtanga Yoga. He speaks about Paryanka Yoga, and he speaks of Ashtama Siddhis. He speaks about Agamas, and Agamas are the sacred texts usually that is followed in the ritualistic practices in any temple. Whenever you go to a temple, you see the physical temple that is made out of stone, made out of metal, made out of wood, and the ritual that happens is very subtle. So that's where again the word Stula and Sukshma comes to our mind. Stula, that is physical, Sukshma is subtle. So while the physical temple is Stula, the activity, the religious and spiritual journey of the seeker is Sukshma. And you have Ati Sukshma, minute, very subtle, extremely subtle. Those are the things that are observed today. So you see both the physicality of it and the metaphysicality of it, all that exists within the temple. So these dialogue between, please.
Yeah, so I always thought Thirumular is a person from Tamil Nadu, right? But whenever I heard the person, it's very strong, very rooted.
It is extremely Tamil, extremely strong Tamil.
Yeah, it's so surprising for me to hear how come. It's like very strong Tamil, and if you read bloggers and all, it's more little subtle. Even if you don't know that deeper grammar of Tamil, you can still understand. But Thirumanthiram is like more deeper grammar.
More deeper grammar. Extremely
deeper. It's so surprising to see that this. So the legend. Do you have any culvator to show that this story has been
epigraphical? That is, written records are not available about any of these people. Let it be Thirumular or even Thiruñana Sambandar, the Bhakti saint who was born in 7th century, or Thirunavukarasar, or Sundarar who came. Their lives are recorded as poetry for the first time by Sundaramurti Nayak when he writes Tiruttondathavai. So by then Shaivism becomes a popular religion in South India, especially Tamil Nadu, strong religion. And then all these people whose lives were touched by Lord Shiva, again with such act, Shiva testing somebody's devotion. Shiva was just giving him a hard time and sort of to see how he reacts. All that holy acts of Shiva, whose lives are touched by them, they become Nayanmars. There Sundaramurti Nayanmar gives a very special place to Thirumular. He says, I am Thirumularku Madiye. I am devotee of Saint Thirumular. For the first time we come across that, but the legends have been there around because later Nambiyandar Nambi, again 2 hours from here where you go to Tirunarayur, he expands that biographical sketch of Sundara and then he gives the detailed one stating that Thirumular was not from here, he came all the way from there in the Himalayan region. And some of them say that Thirumanthiram, some of the verses give strong ideas about Pratyabhijna Shaivism, that is Kashmiri Shaivism, Trikar Shaivism, the philosophical idea. That made me to explore Kashmiri Shaivism even more. So having these ascetics coming all the way from here, going from here, so this moving, we were just talking about Basavanna, who spoke about moving and static and dynamic, Stavara and Jankama, that what stays in one place fades and dies and perishes. What is on the move never dies. That's the idea one gets when these poetries travel, when the legends travel, the literature travels, because you don't know Chidambaram. A person sitting in Kashmir might not have a clue about Chidambaram, but the verses have gone there. Ananda, idea of Ananda, because idea of Ananda from Kashmir to Chidambaram, it has a very, very strong connection. Usually we translate Ananda into happiness, or even more if you are well read, deeper read, you say bliss, state of consciousness. But Kashmiri Shaivism, Tantras like Malini Jyotra have a different perspective of Ananda as well. What is Chidananda? What is Paramananda? All these Ananda concepts are very much in line with Kashmiri Shaivism. So the idea of Ananda, Tirumula speaks about Ananda. What is Ananda? What body sees as Ananda? What mind feels as Ananda? All these questions have been asked in his for the first time, because he is supposed to have lived in 5th century, some 1600 years ago, if you want to put the tag of date on someone. But later poets, they don't speak of philosophy, but they give a glimpse of it here and there. But usually they run full praise of that particular temple, that particular deity in their poetry. That's what becomes. So Chidambaram, Sundara has sung. You have, Trinavukar sir have sung. Jnana Sambandar have sung. Whereas the women, she's supposed to be contemporary of Tirumular, Karaikal Ammayar, the first female poetess in Shaiva religion in South India, from Karaikal, again associated with Pondicherry. From Karaikal, she moves all the way from Karaikal to Thiruvalangad, which is near Chennai. She lives in that temple. She sings in praise of Lord Shiva, who is dancing in the crematorium. All her depiction of the poetry is so raw. Sometimes it sort of scares you, the way she depicts the ghouls and all the, the demons and all the flesh-eating ganas of Shiva. Her poetry gives us completely, very raw picture of Shaivism, whereas Thirumanthiram goes into subtlety and speaks of various philosophical ideas. So the scholars are in the opinion he must have come from somewhere, but the meter, the language sort of puts him on par with Thiruvalluvar's meter. So 4th century, 5th century, whatever it is, definitely Tirumular is 1300 years plus, because Sundara has mentioned him. Sundara is 8th century, that is historically known. So when it comes to all these people putting it, the historicity of saints and philosophers, it's a very, very difficult task, because Kala, the time in Indian context, is very different. We have a cyclic approach to time, linear approach to time. That's why no text, because it is eternal. When they speak about Veda, they say Apaurushaya. Nobody knows when it originated. Nobody knows when it was written. That recording the time of it, something is. That's why we have Kala, Kalatita, Anadi, Adyanta. All that is there in our, I think, ideas because of that.
During the Chola time, we have this culvert, so I was reading a lot about culvert. So they have. In those times, this is where they kept the recording. So it usually come in 3 forms, it is by the king, what is it and why it is. So when I was reading about Bogar, so some people are saying this can be recorded in some temples as a culvert. That's what I asked, whether you have any.
See, when it comes to such epigraphical references, there are references of these Devaram saints in Chola period, which is 10th and 11th century. You have written records available over there, but those written records are post their times. The epigraphy, the written records main source is literature. It is not a contemporary record that was written. So you are able to ask, in some aspects you are able to put a particular saint or a yogi or ascetic in a particular time period through their written literature. The language, the way it is set, the way it is written, in which context, all that you are able to identify. We know for sure Sundara is 8th century. So then it becomes easier. So when he mentions Tirumular, when he mentions Chidambaram existed even before 5th century. We have records of that. So literary sources. Written records are very scanty in nature. So that becomes a very important question, sort of whenever you want to attribute certain dates. I wanted to show you here, since we were talking about temples and the traditions associated with it. For the longest time, right from the Upanishadic philosophical text, that having a physical place for worship has been there. Though we have a common notion that in Vedic literature there was no image worship. But in Rigveda, in the 10th canto itself, we speak about Pratima. Certain images are spoken about. Again, whenever we create an image of a particular god of our belief or whatever it is, the sources are always from the mantras, literary source. Where that literary source comes to us, we say usually the rishis and the saints have perceived that in their mind. So there is already an image. That's what I am trying to put together. So a saint who goes on for a penance for a long time perceives a particular form in his mind. He is not drawing it. He is not creating the image with some material. Rather, he recites about it. Mantras are written. What is the form of Agni? You have a Vedic chanting. Does Agni look like that? No. But we have some form is imagined in mind, comes as a verse, and then later translated into a physical form. Similar to that, we also have Devalaya. The idea of Alaya or a Mandir or Koil in Tamil has been there for longest time. Very long, very, very long time. Once the idea of what is a temple, what does it represent, those questions come into mind, come into picture, then they say it is nothing but a form of a human body. Like you have all the limbs on your body and then your hands and head, ears and eyes, all that. Each part of the temple is also divided into the base plinth is Upapita, upper level is Adhisthana. After that wall portion with a lot of pillars, that is called the Padavarga. The roof is called the Prasthara. And then you have the neck portion of a temple is Gala. And then the top portion is compared with the head, and the top portion is called Shikara or Stupa or Kalasha or whatever you want to call it. This image that is static, that is temple made out of granite, cannot move. Whereas the body, the human body, which has the ability to move. This became a very intriguing thing for seekers and saints. They started comparing the life that is residing within the mind becomes the God, the divine entity. Like the temple has the sanctum sanctorum, we have an image of the God. That's why you give life to that image. That's why it is called Prana Pratishta. When you are establishing a deity, when you are establishing a particular divine image, let it be Ganesha, let it be Muruga, any god for that matter, the process is called Prana Pratishta. Consecration ceremony calls it Prana Pratishta. You are giving energy to it, life to it. Without giving that life, that doesn't become active. So this idea translates into human body becoming a temple, human mind becoming that divine entity. That's where it comes. It can read into one particular philosophy, as he was talking about how Advaita, tagging Advaita sometimes becomes problematic at times. When you say Advaitic, it doesn't mean one thing, it means many things. So, but the idea of human being the divine entity, and that's why many of Indian texts call the human as Amrutasyo Putraha, embodiment of bliss, embodiment of nectar. That we represent such divine entity, that God resides within us. The process is to activate that divine through yogic practices, ultimately realizing that you are along with that you have Samipa, Saloka, Sayujya, Sarupa in that context. You realizing one, and then being with him one, being with the God is one, and then being an image of God is one, and then becoming God is the last stage. So this is the process that's being set out and then often spoken by the saints and seekers in our country. One best example to start with, whenever you see a temple next time, whenever you want to study, go and understand. This, I think, will give a better idea. This particular portion of a temple is called Vimana, Sanctum Sanctorum. The Vimana part is compared with Garbhagraha Shira Proktam, Antaradam Galantata, Mantapam cha Mukhe Babu, Kupshikisham. So each part of the human body is divided and then compared with the part of a temple. What if a man is reclining? So he becomes the entire temple layout with the Gopuram, Prakaram, Balipitam, your Sanctum Sanctorum. And again, you go to Chidambaram temple, they will say there are Pancha Prakaras, 5 open courtyards. Architecturally, historically, for us it means something. Oh, this was done by the Pallavas, this was done by the later dynasty. Oh, Tanjore Marathas came, the Maratha kingdom came to Tamil Nadu, they contributed this. The Vijayanagara Empire from Karnataka came, they added gold to this. All this is data. But when it comes to the Sukshma aspect of it, the metaphysical aspect of the temple, each supposed to represent a layer of our body. Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vayumaya Kosha, Anandamaya Kosha. Each layer of the temple is compared with each layer of our body. Our body is made out of flesh and blood, and then later from there you need the energy prana, and then you have manas, mind, and then you have Anandamaya. Once you transcend all these stages, ultimately you are going to the sanctum sanctorum and realizing that is God who is also residing within us. So that's the connection the land has always been about. Where you are able to identify yourself with the divine entity. That's been the case. That is what Thirumular is all about. Before that, I want to say a verse from Kandar Anubhuti.
That is also the base for Vastu.
Yes,
I just
yes,
want to-
Vastu
yeah,
Purusha Mandala.
yeah, of course.
I just want to add one more thing.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Next picture. So when you said, next picture. So if the human form is sleeping like that, there's one more layer to it. So there are 7 chakras also.
Yeah, yes.
So the Pida, the entrance Gokuram is actually Muladhara chakra.
Muladhara chakra, and then Buddha Swadhisthana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So every point is
Absolutely. And then you have a Dvajastambha also has the same connotation. The
So
feet at the
every
base
point
with
the
the
entry till the Garbhagriha is one chakra.
Yes, again that picture is correctly represents the Vastu Purusha, idea of a universal Brahman. So anyway, whenever somebody, I work with the Stapatis because who are the traditional builders in Mamallapuram, I very closely work with the nephew of Ganapati Stapati. So their ideas, whenever they design, they are right now in US, consecration is going on in the US, and they speak about the grid, 64 squares they make and then install the Vastu Purusha, invoke the Vastu Purusha on that, how the energy pervades in all directions. It's all about energy, it's all about what goes in which direction correctly. So that is another world and universe itself. So, and also this constant question of form to formless or form is something have been intriguing people for the longest time. I'll just leave Thirumular and come to Arunagirinathan, a 16th century poet who was the great devotee of Lord Muruga. This is a very, very interesting from Kandar Anubhuti. Anubhuti is what you are experiencing. The result of your experience is Anubhuti, to put it in a simple term. Uruvai, Aruvai, Uladai, Iladai, Maruvai, Malarai, Maniyai, Odiyai, Karuvai, Uirai, Ghadiyai, Vidiyai, Guruvai, Varuvai, Arulvai, Guhane. This verse perhaps is the most recited verse in any Tamil household. Every morning your parents ask you, come and stand in the puja room, say this, Uruvai, Aruvai, Uladai, Iladai, Maruvai, Malarai, Odiyai, Maniyai, say this. That last sentence is Guruvai, Varuvai, Arulvai, Guhane. This is the message. It's usually the translation is given to us is that whatever it is, he will come in any form, he will come as your guru and protect you. That's the meaning usually. Muruga has to come as a guru and then protect us. But what is very striking is the first line and the second line, and then you go like that. Uruvai, Aruvai. The first question itself is Uru, form. Aru, formless. Uladai, Iladai. Whether it exists or it doesn't exist. Maruvai, Malarai. A bud, flower bud, and then fully bloomed flower. That is Maru, Malar. Maniai, a precious stone, and the radiance of the same stone. Karuvai is a fetus. Uirai, the soul or the self or the mind. Gadiyai, Vidiyai. Guruvai, Varuvai. Now if you sort of read it differently, what he compares is, the first line is Uruvai, Aruvai. Form and formless. Read the first two words in the second line, that Uruvai with form is just a flower. Formless is fragrance. You read that in that manner. Form is flower, formless is fragrance. The idea of Indian spirituality is sort of put it in a very, very simple verse like this. Usually we sing it, we recite it, we sing it in temple. Even about 15 years ago, I was also singing like others. You have to say, because it's a bhakti poetry. You keep saying it, you say it. It's like a mantra, you keep saying it. But once you start taking your guidance from your guru, and then he gives you this perspective, he compares idol worship or form to a flower. But when you are liberated, go beyond form, you become formless, and then that is like a fragrance or a fully bloomed flower. Again, gem and radiance. Maniai, Oliyai. Your form is limiting, which can be seen. But once you have to see understand how radiant it is, you have to go beyond that. So again, as we spoke in the beginning, Stula and Sukshma, physical and metaphysical, form and formless. This has been, again, he compares body is the form, soul is formless. Salvation, rules and of righteousness. Such manifestation of Guha is such, says Arunagirinatha. This one verse in Kandaranubhuti just gives the spiritual quest that has been happening in our country for centuries. Often we come across traditions, you spoke about Siddhas, they are right royally, they sort of disregard all these rituals and image and worshipping, all that, especially Siddhas like Shiva Vakya, who says this is madness. Sitting in front of an idol and worshipping it, pouring milk and honey and flowers into it, that's not going to get you anywhere. You have to realize that Shiva who is within you. Usually that is the Siddhas tradition, especially Siddhas and Veerashaiva cult in Karnataka for that matter. It will be Basavanna and others who sort of condemn the building of temples and spending so much money. In one of his poetry, Basavanna says, I don't have wealth and money so much to sort of build such stylized ornated temples. All I have is my life within me. My legs become the gopuras, and then my head becomes the vimana, shikara of the vimana, and then the life inside is what Shivalinga is. So the same idea was told by Thirumular in Thirumanthiram. Interestingly, when Basavanna lived in 12th or 13th century, you see Karnataka was at its peak in architecture. The Hoysalas were pouring their wealth on such temples. Most sophisticated architecture, lavishly spent, lavishly built. On the other hand, you also, in the same landscape, you have a movement that is Veerashaiva movement, constantly questioning this, why there is so much being spent, where you have the God and your guiding light within you. All this is being spoken by the saints and seekers for the longest time. Just to get into some few verses only I am going to speak about today. The mantra is 3046. Usually it is understood as 3000. When it common man's understanding, how many verses are there in Thirumanthiram? There are 3000. But the actual number is 3046. We are entering into another thing. It is divided into 9 tantras. Tantra. How far we have understood the difference between mantra and tantra is another thing, because the tantra is understood differently by different people. What comes to your mind when we say tantra?
I would want to ask.
You wanted to ask me? Okay. Anybody? Just to understand tantra.
Buddhist tantra, other tantra, everything has a different idea of it. But
Again, because tantra is one commonly understood, one term is
It's sacred geometry.
Sacred, yeah, exactly. Sacred, yeah,
Every
opposite.
sacred geometry is shaped by that energy and direction. Like
Yes.
anywhere, like if you see mother symbol also, it's sacred geometry. Like Mathura is for sacred geometry. So whenever you create something with that shape, then it has that spiritual direction.
We need to ask the philosopher in the room. What do you think of Tantra? When we say mantra and Tantra, how do you sort of make someone understand what is the difference? Why it is addressed in such a way? If at all, if you are put in a spot and asked such things.
For me, Tantra is the know-how.
Absolutely. Okay. No, no.
And what he means for me, that is Yantra.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's like how we practice that in a deeper.
In Tantra, sometimes my guru used to say Tantra, sometimes Upaya, the way, formula. Tantra usually that why you use. Tantra is in Tamil it is completely a different connotation. It has Tandiramna, it was some tricky.
Yes.
Tandiram so. Yeah.
I feel like the definition that I was following was slightly different. Maybe because I was younger, but you could say that mantra is theory and tantra is practice.
Practice.
So how true is that? I don't know.
No, because each region, each sort of school of thought has the way to interpret. Kashmiri Shaivism uses Tantra to describe agamas. We call it agamas, they call it as Tantra. So these Tantra is usually considered to be way or as he rightly said, know-how. How to certain things or how to understand or how to explain certain things. Tantra is at times can be a path to understand certain ideas. So all the verses that are there, yeah.
Is it only to understand or is it also to concentratedly invoke? Because through that process, there is also what little I understand is to concentratedly invoke something, let it come out.
Yeah, certainly. So the result is also through Tantra. The end result that we are getting through it is also associated with the Tantras only. So the Tantras, it could be, as he said, it is know-how as well as the group, a formula, idea, that sort of to get the end result. That is usually, generally, but in Shakta cult, Tantra is different. As you said, the Buddhist has a definition of Tantra, and you have many interpretations to it. And all these 9 Tantras, and as I said, he speaks about the Guru Parampara. Tirumula speaks about the Guru Parampara. He speaks about Shiva. He speaks about do's and don'ts. And especially he sort of condemns the intake of any intoxicating materials such as liquor or anything, and he condemns the act of having meat, consuming meat, all this being there along with Tiruvallur's thing. That is one chapter. He speaks about Ashtama Siddhi, Ashtanga Yoga, and speaks about Shakti Tantra separately. He speaks about idea of Shakti, idea of Shiva, how they come together, the creation of the universe, and then according to Shaiva Siddhanta, the philosophy of Shaivism in South India, Shiva does 5-fold act: Srishti, Sthiti, Samhara, Tirobhava, and Anugraha. He creates, he protects, he destroys, he conceals, and he reveals. This Panchakritya is what depicted in Shiva's dancing form there. With the Damaruka, he creates. With his Abhaya Hasta in his hand, he protects. With the fire, he destroys. And then, with the foot standing firmly on the ground, and then he holds this particular gesture, we call it as Gajahasta. With that, he conceals. And then, with the lifted left leg, he reveals. So, looking at his, that particular toe part of Nataraja Shiva is called Kunchita Pada. That is where the secret of the entire his 5-fold act is revealed. That's where the jnana is given. So the idea of Panchakritya from creation to, and then again there are many philosophical parallels we can draw to that. Which school speaks about Panchabhutas? From Sankhya again, you have the Panchabhuta, and then they say Panchabhutas in its static state, and then when they become kinetic and the creation happens. Mula Prakriti, exactly. So such ideas are born. But when it comes to such a sthula image, then these secrets are also revealed. So Thirumular addresses that as well as he speaks about many aspects of Shiva and energies coming together, creation happening, and then mind. He speaks about the body. So that's where I thought it will be easier, because in the beginning he speaks about, in some chapters he speaks about the body. At the end he speaks about internalizing the sun and moon within the body. So I just took few verses so that we can get this conversation happening. I think this is also my first time here, and Sudha wasn't. She was telling me we have different mix of people. We have to sort of get the conversation started. Then we will take it later, she said. And and when he speaks about the body, he sort of speaks about. I will sing the verse. It is written in Tamil. உடம்பாரழியில் உயிராரழிவர் திடம்பட மெய்ஞானம் சேரவும் மாட்டார் உடம்பை வளர்க்கும் உபாயமறிந்தே உடம்பை வளர்த்தேன் உயிர் வளர்த்தேன் உடம்பை வளர்த்தேன் உயிர் வளர்த்தேன். Those who understand Tamil, the last line is the catch. உடம்பை வளர்த்தேன் உயிர் வளர்த்தேனே. Because constantly ridiculing the body, seeing body as a limitation, seeing body as a constraint, a certain school of thought has evolved over a period of time. Many of us know, they say this body is so limiting. This body is, with this body I am not able to, I need to go to a different state. That has been there. When it comes to Thirumular, he says, I learned the way of preserving my body. And he says, I realize how important the body is. He says, Udambai Valarthe, Uir Valartene. By protecting my body and then enriching my body, I am enriching my soul. Uir Valartene. The life residing inside it has to be nurtured. So it's sort of, sometimes it can come out as a counter to the sort of hardship of penance and the certain schools, like let it be Buddhists or Jains, the kind of a process they go through. It could be seen in that context, but also understanding the potential of body, the potential of a body that can do, is something as being very, very important in terms of Shaivite philosophy, as well as some of the philosophical idea of Vaishnavism in South India, also very detailedly spoken about. And he says, Udambai munnam izhukkendru irundhen. உடம்பினை முன்னம் இழுக்கின்றிருந்தே உடம்பினுக்குள்ளே ஒரு பொருள் கண்டே உடம்புளே உத்தமன் கோயில் கொண்டான் என்று உடம்பினையானிருந்து Another verse, how beautifully written is Udambinai munnam izhukkendrundhen. Once upon a time there, when I thought the body is so limiting, I sort of ridiculed my own body. But then I saw God within. And the body, I realized, is the Lord's temple. If I have to preserve that divinity, I need to preserve this physical body also. And so I began preserving it with care infinite. So this is another aspect of the body that Thirumanthiram addresses, Thirumular speaks of. And again, he was a yogi, he was doing his heart penance, and then he came all the way from there, and then he teaches for the first time about the Thirukkural speaks about Yakkai Nilayamai. Thiruvalluvar, another poet, not a bhakti poet, but a great philosopher, says, Yakke nilayame. The body is not permanent. It is not an immortal entity. It is going to leave. So the world has to understand how limited this is. But on the contrary, we have such answers and we have such dialogues coming from it. 1823, உள்ளம் பெருங்கோயில் ஊனுடம்பு ஆலயம் வள்ளல் பிரானார்க்கு வாய் கோபுர வாசல் தெள்ளத் தெளிந்தார்க்கு ஜீவன் சிவலிங்கம் கள்ள புலன் ஐந்தும் காளா மணி விளக்கே. So the heart is the sanctum holy, the heart where he resides. The flesh body is the temple vast. The mouth is the tower gate. Here the gopuram is vai gopura vasal. Vallal piranarku vai gopura vasal. To one who are able to comprehend the idea of the divinity, the mouth becomes the gopura. The jiva is Shivalinga. The mind is what linga, Shivalinga. The one who realizes Shiva within. For them the life itself is Shivalinga. Jiva is Shivalinga. Sorry. And then after many chapters and then many verses and sort of the idea of mind comes. Now he speaks about your yogic practices through your Shivaraja Yoga, Paryanka Yoga, and then your activation of your Kundalini Chakra. He goes on to describe how important, how carefully you have to deal with your... There are a set of verses that speaks about breathing. How you have to breathe in the morning, in the noon and the evening when you doing the pranayama practice. So in Thirumanthiram pranayama, your breathing exercise becomes the most important, the crucial thing when you read certain chapters. You must have read some of the verses. Yeah, he speaks about it. And those who are, these are all the translations not done by me, a great scholar called B. Natarajan. He has done the translation. Those who are interested, you please source the book, and many of you might be interested because these are all very fascinating to read. வலய முக்கோணம் வட்டமறுகோணம் துளையிரு வட்டம் துய்ய விதமெட்டில் அலையுற்ற வட்டத்தில் ஈரெட்டு இதழா மலை உற்று உதித்தனன் ஆதித்தனாமே. Here he speaks about the microcosmic sun. He speaks about the Surya that residing in a yogi's body. When you activate the Mooladhara, each chakra is, as you all know, each chakra has been given a shape. The triangle is Mooladhara, and then above the hexagonal center of Swadhisthana, above the twin circle of Manipura, and then 16 petaled Vishuddhi, there indeed rises the sun within. This is your yoga where you are able to internalize the sun. So as I was saying, the God in the sanctum sanctorum, in the body, you also have the macrocosmic sun, idea of macrocosm, and then you have the microcosmic sun within the body, activated through the mind focusing on each of the chakras. So that's where Tirumular comes when it comes to the understanding of the body and mind, how you activate. And he says, Adithan odi adangum idam kandu sadikka vallavar thammai unarndavar பேதித்து உலகம் பிதற்றும் பிதற்றெல்லாம் ஆதித்தனோடே அடங்குகின்றாரே. So this is a another very tricky Thirumanthiram. My sort of, I'm not a full-time yogi practitioner, but the guru I was learning Thirumanthiram from was trying to tell me, you are identifying the sun. You observe, the mind follows the sun inside the body. The mind observes the sun within. He is also able to, the yogis, he or she is able to see the sun outside, the macrocosmic, also the microcosmic. And within the body where the mind, where the sun is realized, and within reposes, they indeed are the self-realized ones. And they say, Pedittu ulagam pidattrum pidattralam. The worldly people may say 1,000 other things. They don't know, they don't realize the sun. They always watch the stula is showing. They will be never able to realize the sukshma, the sun within. The sun rises, the sun sets within the body. So that understanding, that's where so whatever that happens, there is a saying in Tamil, Andathil ulladu pindathil. Whatever is existing in the universe is happening inside your body as well. So that is where the cosmic connection comes. And then you have Agum Kalayod Arukkan Analmadi Agum Kalailai Nangu Enalam Ember Agum Arukkan Analmadiyodu Ondra Agum Appuranayam Endru Arivume. Within your colors, various part of your yogic body, you have sun, moon and fire arises from these colors, intermingling of their rays, thus are they kalas 4. The color, what are the different types of colors, all that for some other time, because we have very limited time. And when sun, moon and the fire mingle their rays, then is full moon within notice. So he spoke about the microcosmic sun, and he also speaks about the microcosmic moon. You have your Surya Nadi, and then you have Chandra Nadi, Ida and Pingala, controlled by sun and moon. Then when they come with your Agnya Chakra within the fire, all three becomes, and then it becomes the moon that is radiating, and then the moon that is very cool. So that's where the mind of it that comes. The sun that rises within the body vast stands within two shedding rays of divine, that Chandra and Agni and Surya. In direction 8, he is constant. That's why you have for Nataraja, Lord Shiva also spoken about 3 eyes. You have the Surya, Chandra and Agni in between. And then சென்றெடுத்து 8 திசையெங்கும் போய் வரும். In direction 8 he traverses constant. நின்றெடத்தே நிலை நேரறிவார்க்கே. So the people who realize the truth about the mind and the connection within the body, he stands forever fixed within. Yet in them the truth know, he stands forever fixed within. So that's what Thirumangalar's questions of mind and body. I thought we'll stop with that for today, and then we can have a discussion some other time, and then time permits, and I also have to get to know you all, and then you have to know me as well. So I think, thank you so much for making this happen. So thank you. Hope you all not enjoy, but hope you all sort of have questions and ideas and views. You are most welcome to share for next 10 to 15 minutes. Next, if they want to say something.
Yes, of course. Thank you. So yes, this was definitely, I just threw him in. I didn't give him any idea of like who's coming, what kind of, do they know Tamil or not, or do they know about Thirumanthiram? Nothing really. He just jumped in and did it. So thank you very much. So this is what we're seeing as a beginning, really a way to. Actually, can someone turn that off? Just project.
I think a long press.
Just.
Yes.
Press it
Again, yeah. Press it again. It'll go off. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. So envisioning this really as a beginning, I'm hoping you can come back and sort of, and would like your feedback of because there's different spaces where we can really focus. For me, personally, like the verses, the music of it, and the language, like when I hear the Tamil and the translation and hear the music of it, just to get into that. And we spoke about also maybe next time the bhakti poetry of a lot of saints that we don't get to hear about or even get to sing about. Some of us may want to actually just sing also. We can share that.
Any singers here, please, you are most welcome.
And even otherwise.
Even otherwise you can sing with us.
So you can share actually with him or me, or even write up there what kind of, within this, where your interest is, and then we can sort of design it accordingly and have it be like this, or of more of a Saturday and Sunday longer and learning a little more in depth. This is sort of just one aspect. Thirumanthiram is something he's picked, but you can tell his knowledge is very vast. So you're welcome to also share your ideas in that. But yes, for me personally, speaking in front of everyone, more than the history for me, which can kind of get us into the mind again, I definitely want to immerse more in more the latter half of it. So that's my personal interest. Because that's why even when I was thinking PPT, that automatically for me
It's
bring me up
limiting,
to my
yeah, it's
end.
limiting, yeah.
So that's personally my thing, but I would love to hear where, what your-
Usually when I talk, it has become a habit of keeping a laptop and a PowerPoint. It sort of happens automatically. It's you just go.
No, it's fine. It's also useful and it's nice in the beginning to also, because to enter into it suddenly into the like a well of
Yeah.
but so that little context and all is definitely very useful. I'm not saying anything about that. So any kind of comments or suggestions or anything like that?
Just getting onto that thing, like
Yeah.
having the presentation up was really nice because the whole time so I don't sleep.
Oh, yeah.
So when you were singing, it was nicer that while I was reading the translation, I was sort of understanding the music as well.
Okay, thank you.
So
Thank you.
that felt all the more sort of, I could feel goosebumps at some points because of that mix. So I really appreciated that,
Thank you.
having the translation.
Exactly what you said actually before.
PPT wasn't a bad idea after all.
Exactly. Just seeing the Tamil script itself, just for that, is definitely very, very adds
No,
a
I
lot.
can read it, but I cannot understand. I think it's very deeper words.
Yeah.
So it was good. The translation was
No,
good.
speaking about color,
Uh,
my guru Swarna Swamusundaram, she was in Coimbatore. Weeks together we spoke about color because the word color is itself has to be dealt and spoken different, completely on a different platform for for weeks together. There is so much in terms of language as you are a Tamil speaking person.
Yeah. I'm basically Malayali, but I
Yes.
also read.
Right and right. But even people who regularly speak Tamil, these verses sometimes it's not sometimes, most of the time it's very challenging.
No, I'm very much interested about the Siddhas.
Yeah.
So I always read a lot about it. Last year, I 1 month doing some. I spent with a friend. He's also monk in Bodai. So every day he was playing Thirumanthiram, like the whole verses.
Yeah.
So every day, like it goes for hours. Like okay. Then when I came back, it was like very intriguing. Read. Then I find a book here in the library, but it was very deep. The grammar was very tough. Even I know the very basic stuff. Like it cannot. So I didn't got a good translation.
Yeah.
Good you were referring this person. Like I like.
If you want the translation of Ramakrishna Math Publications Chennai,
Okay.
their
But it's a
translation
good translation.
is a very good
It's
translation.
very simple, simplified, and
Huh?
The person
B. Natarajan, one of the great scholars in Shaiva philosophy, B. Natarajan.
Very interesting name. So, I did not have a background understanding of what Shaivite philosophy
Yeah.
is. You talked of bhakti, you talked about few things. So, where is the text located? Can you also in the while understanding the Shaivite space, what does the text fundamentally talk about?
Okay, so there are two set of texts. One is the Bhakti literature text that is written by these saints between 5th to 9th century that are sung on a daily basis in Shaivite temples even today. And the verses are translated in English by Gopal Iyer, here very much in Pondicherry at the French Institute. The French Institute in Pondicherry, if you have a time, please go and see the kind of work they do in the field of Indology is phenomenal. For last 70-80 years that they have been here around doing such work, they have translated in English, French, all the religious texts of India, focusing in Tamil literature, Bhakti literature especially. Their verses are available, translation available even online to read the Bhakti aspect of it, devotional hymns that are. Second set of texts that is known as Shastras. So you have Stotras as well as Shastras. The Shaivite philosophy in Tamil Nadu evolves around 11th century to 13th century, the Meikandar. You have the spiritual perceptors that came in the 12th and 13th century. That is known as Shaiva Siddhanta. You have the Vedanta, the Vedic philosophy. You have Siddhanta that is closely associated with Shaivite religion. That is known as Shaiva Siddhanta. That text is also very much available in English for us to understand and all that. Especially History of Shaiva Siddhanta is a book I would recommend. I'll definitely send the link in the group so that you can read up. And this is a treasure house that you are sitting in nearby, this French town, that French Institute of Pondicherry. extraordinary work that the institution has done. So whenever we spoke a lot about Pondicherry, she was saying, can we do this series? I think it's the right place to do because so much academic has happened, so much spirituality and then culture thriving around this region. From here onwards till you reach Kanyakumari, you will see mandirs of Shiva and Vishnu all over. And Pondicherry, from the French time, it always been a great center for learning and writing and documenting. I think everything is available for us, thankfully. Even some of the Kashmiri texts they have translated. They recently brought out Agamic, some Kashmiri Agamas being translated by a scholar here in Pondicherry. The publication has just come.
I'm very much interested in how the Kashmiri Shaivism is connected with this.
Yes,
Like
that connection. Even I am trying to explore because I was not aware about Kashmiri Shaivism till recently. Yeah. So that lot of activities now, thankfully, in digital world, many scholars are available for us to access and teach. They are ready to teach. All that is happening. But Kashmir connection, especially Chidambaram, it is because sorry to speak history, but when the Chola kings came there, spiritual gurus, they came from Bengal region. So you have a Golaki Mutt here. The Nath cult that came to here. The Gorakhnath, that's what is Gorakhar here in Tamil. The Gorakhnath Mutt, Gorakhpur. That school of thought that came here. The Nandinatha, the Sundaranatha Tirumular himself, they must have come from the Nada. We call it as Nada tradition here. And then it has to do with your Nada and Bindu. That tradition is how these Nada tradition came from Nada.
Things also, I'll read about this, reading about the Chidambara Rahasya.
Yeah.
It's a secret in Chidambara temple. So, still I've been reading a lot about this.
So behind the Nataraja there is a screen. There, behind that you have around 21 bilva leaves that are hung. Behind that you have two chakras. One is Sri Chakra, one is Nataraja Chakra. About both, Tirumular speaks about it. That is the Chidambara Rahasya. Actually, the Ananda Tandava, the dancing image is something beyond physical dancing. Now, if you ask all the Bharatanatyam dancers, the Shiva is dancer. When you read Kashmiri Shaivism, you understand, especially texts like Malini Vijayottara. I recently studied under an Acharya. Malini Vijayottara, it gives a different dimension to the word Ananda. What is Ananda? Then I thought, whatever you have been speaking about Nataraja and Ananda is completely sort of reversed, and then this has to be understood in a certain way. So in that sense, the philosophical ideas, the words that we commonly use, Tamil we have a word, adikalla oru yogam venum. Yogam usually think of fortune or lucky and all that. That yogam gives, in my rural, in Tanjavur region, we have sadanga sankhya mudinjada. We say sadanga, somebody is wedding happened, sadanga, that is a ritual. They will also add this word sankhya mudinjada. Sankhya means, then I understood, sankhya has to do with sankhya, the philosophy. There are certain words that are used in colloquial terms. It has a completely philosophical connotation to it. We often tend to sort of miss it all the time. So yes, Kashmiri Shaivism, but if you have time, go and visit French Institute of Pondicherry. They are very welcoming, very friendly. Many publications are available for us to buy, and also you have to write a letter and they let you to access their wonderful library. Plenty of things are there on South Indian Shaivism. Definitely, plenty of sources. I can share whatever available, the links I can share. You can download it, you can read it on your Kindle or iPad. Sorry.
The last question. You mentioned the poetess who wrote
Karekal Ammayar.
Yeah. What was the book that she is writing on this description? Shiva's description?
In Thiruvalangattu, what the work of hers is called the Thiruvalangattu Mootha Tirupadigam, translated in English, that is available. I will share that book also.
Thank you so much.
She's another revolutionary in South Indian
I
context.
wish to know what are the descriptions.
Yeah, sure. I will share. As soon as I reach and I take the pictures of the verses, I will share it with her. You can.
Thank you so much.
No problem. No. I love sharing these things. So we all have to learn together. So.
So I got lost in the discussion of Tantra. What is it?
You're still there.
He was like, what were you trying to say?
That makes sense because all of the definitions that came out were
It is a know-how to, as we pointed out. Tantra is something that how you identify something, how you sort of logically build something, logically come to a conclusion with. For that, the Tantra guides you. It's a very actually you can, as Tamil use for Tantra, some trick, some way, some path. That's what Tantra means. So the Tantra has to be a guided one, then it becomes Tantra.
So you said this text is very interestingly placed. It is not sung. So can you talk a little more of where this text is vis-a-vis Southern Shaivism? Because here it's not sung much. It's not maybe that popular in a sense. But so how is this text interesting, and how is it interestingly placed?
For the first time in Tamil, South Indian Shaivism, we have theology and philosophy put together in one text. Also speaks of the creation. No other text particularly speaks about it. Thirumanthiram speaks about how this universe was born. In Shaivite perspective, for the first time it speaks about that. As I said, theology in terms of identifying your guru, how you should worship, how you cannot, create any damage to a place of worship, all that it speaks about. For the very first time, exclusively all these are being spoken of. Later poets, as I was telling her, the Karakalame, the lady poet who went to Thiruvalangadu, she stayed in one place, she sung about that particular temple. Interestingly, she doesn't speak about Chidambaram at all in the 5th century. So, Chidambaram is not spoken. Thirumanthiram speaks about it for the first time. Later, there are 3 saints, a man known as Thirunjana Sambandar, who was born in Sirkadi, Thirunavukkarasar, again in this region, and Sundarar, again in this region. These 3 men travel from one village to another village, visiting Shiva temples, composing hymns exclusively on that particular deity and that particular village. So those collection put together is known as Devaram in Tamil. We call it Devaram. Thirumanthiram, as the name suggests itself, it's very sacred and it's very secretive. So there are certain verses that you can understand directly. There are certain verses you have to go through your guru to understand the concept. For the first time, philosophy is spoken, and when I say it is not sung as popular as the other. Because when I say about Chidambaram, there are hundreds of songs that are composed over centuries. But Thirumanthiram, it does not speak about one particular temple or one particular presiding deity of a particular town or a village. It speaks about Shiva or the Shivatva, that is through philosophy. So how one identifies Shiva, that is within, that is everywhere. So that's, in that sense, it is very peculiar. It is not always set to tune and sung. People have been singing Thirumanthiram in their own tune. Whatever I have been singing, I just on the spot I decided this is the rag I am going to sing, I just sang. But it's no particular tune set. For the other hymns and songs of Devaram, the music is set. Music is perfectly set.
I'm very surprised and happy that everyone is whoever has come, however you found out about this event, you're definitely meant to be here, because the way that you're so involved, so curious, I really appreciate you being here and so fully present. So thank you. As you know, he has put in many places. Please follow him. He has a Courtyard Travels. Has a page online.
Yeah.
So you can reach out to him directly and ask all your questions, because I think you have many, many more. We can even maybe have some trips also planned in the future where he can sort of take a
Visit Chidambaram maybe.
Yeah, that
with
would be
you.
great.
Yeah.
Go to Chidambaram, spend a day. Yeah, you can take some bus and go there. And sit.
Yeah.
I go also. It would be nice to go with someone.
Maybe over a
Please
week.
make it a weekend.
Oh, weekend, yeah, sure, sir.
It would be nice to go with someone who knows about so you can explain something. This is what
We will go and we can sit and discuss. Yeah, it's a very nice place to go and spend a day also.
3-4
It's
hours
nearby.
easily can. Whenever I go 3-4 hours, it goes like that. I was an architect, so everything.
Oh, you are an architect. Yeah. Have you seen that night ritual at Chidambaram? Usually it's at 11 o'clock. Oh, it's a spectacle. So that's why I say, the physical of it is something, and the culture and the traditions around it are just, it gives you so much of so much to see. The 2 eyes aren't enough for certain thing to be captured. So we will make a plan to Chidambaram sometime. Whenever you are free, we can take some bus and van or something.
Yeah, that's
So, I will add all of you to the WhatsApp group and I'll update you whenever he's coming next or any of the other events you'll be updated on. You have, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I wasn't a query. What I'm really amazed by is your passion. And it's, it comes through. It's easy to read. The book is 200 rupees. It's easy to read. Pick up the book and read the translation. But what comes through is a certain passion and the love for it. And that is really precious. So I'm grateful for this service and how freely and open-heartedly you're sharing it, joyfully. So I just wanted to say thanks for that. And I hope we get an opportunity to partake of your passion.
Oh, thank you. Very kind of you. Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you. I think my teachers have been very gracious enough to share, so it's naturally that comes because.
Well, it's not just them. It's
Yeah.
Thank you, Naveen.
I just want to add to that, he's using his music to make it more, connect with people, and that's also beautiful, music can connect more.
Yeah.
easily with
Yeah.
people. And you can use music in different ways, but this is amazing. You are using it.
Because I make it a point whenever I visit or take a group to temple, I sing there, sit and sing, so that suddenly there is some sort of energy comes from everyone. It's really energizing to even speak or discuss more and explore more.
When I hear it, last year only it got connected. When I read it, I couldn't understand much, but when I hear it repeatedly, then it's okay, then it's
Music,
something.
yeah, it does.
Music
Music
has
has
that
that
power.
Music definitely has that. That verse, I think, verse is something nice, but when it's musically sung, it means it sort of increases the depth of it even more. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Actually, I forgot that I had some fruits and juice. Most of you probably have to go, but if you choose to stay, I'll just bring it out now. I think that's it. We'll wrap it up now. Again, also if you can follow the Sunlit Path online, Sunlit Path community on Facebook and Instagram. And again, if you'd like to donate, it's at the front. It'll go fully towards supporting the space and the artist. Yeah, much appreciated, and look forward to seeing you at all, or not all, but many of the future events here.